All right, we are joined by Paul Barrett and Heather Hansen with the No on 522 campaign. So go ahead with up to 5 minutes to present the No position on 522.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us here this evening. We appreciate having this opportunity. We're going to share our concerns with you about Initiative 522. I think this initiative is costly and unnecessary. It will cause thousands of familiar products that we all know and have been eating for decades to be either relabeled or reformulated. Companies who don't wish to have a warning label on their product will have to reformulate. Their other alternative is to reformulate using more expensive ingredients. Now, you may have heard last night that a label doesn't cost much. Well, that's true. A label doesn't cost much. But think about our food distribution system. Food distribution doesn't start and stop at state lines. So if you're a company somewhere else in the country making a food product, you now have to run a separate line just for the packages with the Washington label, put them on a separate pallet, keep track of them separately in your inventory system. When you pick the order to go to the regional warehouse, you have to pick it separately, keep track of it separately. It's that duplicate registration or tracking system, an inventory system that really drives up costs. It's unnecessary because if you want food that's produced without using biotechnology, and that's what we're talking about here, biotechnology, it's the same technology that's used in medicine. We already have a label for that. You can look for the organic label. That system's already in place. The American Medical Association, World Health Organization, National Academy of Sciences, Food and Drug Administration, even the European Commission all say there's no reason to label. There are no health concerns. But, let's talk about farms, because agriculture is a huge industry in this state. And Paul and I both grew up on farms, and agriculture groups across the state of Washington all oppose this initiative. They are concerned about the increased paperwork, the increased liability, and that it limits their opportunity to use new technology. You know what they love about this is how easy it makes farming and how they can save diesel, save on inputs. The people using the herbicide-tolerant crops just love it from a farming perspective. The initiative creates a new bureaucracy within the Department of Health. Our greatest concern about that is that it creates an additional competition for scarce tax dollars. And it also has a kind of a hodgepodge of exemptions, or it actually exempts 2/3 of food served in Washington from the labeling scheme. So, for example, if I go to the grocery store and buy a pizza, there would be a label on the package. But that same pizza, if I call and have it delivered to my house, there's no label. Same pizza served to your child in the school cafeteria, there's no label. So we think it's not really giving consumers consistent information, not answering the questions that consumers are asking. I'm very conscious of the clock here, and I want to give Paul some time, so I'm going to turn it over.
Great. Well, I'm just going to say a few things. It's not about labeling, it's about an anti-genetically enhanced foods campaign. This is an anti-science campaign. We work very hard on issues like global warming to get the public to support the science and to get policymakers to support the science. Yet, in this campaign, what we're saying, it's an anti-science campaign. Hundreds of doctors and scientists, including some of the greatest experts at the University of Washington and Washington State University, are opposed to this effort. And this is an anti-poor effort. This is a campaign that's going to hurt the poor. Anybody who's been to Europe and has gone to supermarkets, there's a reason why food is about twice as costly there as it is here in the United States. It's because this is one of the huge contributing factors, and we've all been to PCC versus Fred Meyer as an example. I would just ask you, please vote against this campaign. It's anti-science, it's going to hurt the poor, and And I think it's against the finest traditions of what we stand for in the Democratic Party.
Great, thank you. So now we'll open up to follow-up questions. See, Clayton, I have one, and who was this? Clayton.
Do GMO foods increase or decrease the use of herbicides?
Absolutely decrease. There's no question about that. Now, it
Roundup? What about the use of products like Roundup?
So Roundup.
I'm asking a question about the food and the impact on the food chain of GMO products.
So if you look at all herbicide use, and you're looking at herbicide-tolerant crops, we're reducing the total amount of herbicide use. So you could probably make the argument that we might be using more Roundup, but using fewer other herbicides. So, and Roundup is simply one brand name, but, and there are different herbicides out there. But overall, it is definitely reducing herbicide use. And let me give you a great example. We grow a lot of canola in Washington, and virtually all of the canola grown in Washington is herbicide tolerant. And those growers, I could take you to Eastern Washington right now and introduce you to growers that love it, because rather than spraying 4 and 5 times to control weeds, they spray once and they're done. They're saving 75% on their diesel bill, 75% fewer diesel emissions into the atmosphere, less soil compaction, less erosion, and 75% less herbicide.
Right, so one of the arguments we heard last night was that 60 some odd countries already require this kind of labeling, and I know that we're in a global agricultural market, and we're the #1 export state in the country, and part of that's Boeing, but a lot of it is our agricultural products. So to what extent do the labeling requirements in other countries already affect sort of the the production line? And talking about having sort of parallel tracks. Are there already parallel tracks in order to comply with the labeling in other countries, even here?
I just want to say one thing, and I'll turn over to Heather. This is not about adding GMO to the ingredients label. This is a warning label on the front of these products, and I just want to make that abundantly clear. So in many countries they have GMO products are in the ingredient label and whatnot, but that's not what this campaign is about.
So to go back to exporting, it has not been an issue at all. We export crops from Washington around the world and have had no concerns. And we hand out the list of agricultural organizations that are opposed to this initiative because across the board they're opposed. I think I missed the very first part of your question. I wanted to answer that.
Last night in an argument we heard there were 60 some odd countries that are already doing this, and so I guess my question was, is it not as expensive because those costs are already there to comply with these other countries?
Well, one of the things that is very unique about this is we would be the only state in this country with this type of requirement. So when you look at a country, and remember what I said about food distribution systems, so if you have a food distribution system within an entire country and you make a change that affects the entire country, that's less dramatic than when you cut off one little corner from the rest of the country. Our state lines aren't like country borders, so that's why it would have a greater impact here.
So actually there's like 22 states that are considering this, so it isn't like we would be the only one. Out of 23, most likely others will be doing it. And there are a couple of states that have passed it, although they have to have states surrounding their borders to pass it before it actually becomes effective. But I had a question about you were saying some of these arbitrary things like food that you buy in a restaurant, pizza you buy in a restaurant doesn't have to be labeled, but the pizza in the store does. Well, we already have that issue with most restaurants where it doesn't have to be labeled saying how much sodium is in the food, how much hydrogenated oils are in the food. So that's the same. It isn't like it's an arbitrary thing because we already don't require, unless they're a big chain, then we do have some requirements for labels. But if they're not, then we don't have the requirement that restaurants or the deli label the foods anyway. So,
Well, I think your question is what are, is about the exemptions, because there are actually a lot more than just restaurant exemptions, and I don't know, Heather.
well, there's the alcohol exemption, but that's
Well, no,
governed
no,
by
no.
a complete
Can I give you an example that I think is interesting using cheese? Virtually all cheese is made with an enzyme called chymosin. And chymosin was developed through biotechnology. It is a genetically modified enzyme. But all dairy products are exempt. So even though it is made with using biotechnology, it would not be labeled because it's a dairy product. Vegetarian cheese made with soy products would be labeled if the soy is herbicide tolerant. So you get this real confusing mixture of what is and isn't.
Evan and then David, and then Mary.
So, I have two questions. Which one to ask first? I guess I will ask a question about the example you talked about it having an impact on the poor, which absolutely it would, and in the sense that most people who are lower income are by necessity have to shop at stores where the food is cheaper. But we've also, there are parallel problems that poses for people that are lower income, higher rates of obesity among people that are lower income, for instance. To what extent do you feel like it may be necessary at some point to have a change, that even if there is a temporary impact, that is this not just a shove that we need in the right direction to ultimately be able to provide healthier food for the poor?
Well, I think that's not addressed in this initiative per se, but let me just say, something that will probably happen if this passes is there would be reformulation, because some products will not want to have a big warning label on the front of their food, not because it's unsafe, but because it damages market share, and this is why the proponents want to do this. There are economic interests that want greater market share based on, the policy that this would set. When that reformulation takes place, people will be buying many of the same products reformulated. So as far as fighting obesity and whatnot, cookies are still going to be on the shelf. Canned peaches and heavy syrup are still going to be on the shelf. It is just that these are going to be more expensive products because the ingredients will be more expensive, as well as the labeling issues.
Thank you.
Go ahead, give some comments.
Sorry, go ahead.
Address a little bit of an issue that you brought up a little bit ago about other states. And it's true that it may, in the future, there may be other states that pass this type of program. We don't know that yet. What we do know now is that there's no other state that has a law on the books that would be like what 522 proposes. The states on the East Coast have so many, either they haven't been signed into law in one case, but the one that has so many strings attached that probably will never be implemented. But the most important thing there is those are states that don't have an ag economy. We have a huge ag economy in this state. Agriculture is very, very important, and we're concerned about what it will do to our growers and our ag economy.
David and then Mary.
I'm a little confused. I mean, this is a difficult one. And because I'm a 15-year-old, I would like to know what we're putting on the table. I think I have a right to know. And I'm not certain whether I'm hearing you all correctly, because it sounds like what you're objecting to is the means rather than the ends. For example, you're talking about the labels, GMO, whatever, labeled as an element of the ingredients in my box of Cheerios. I would think is GMO is a warning label I have mixed feelings about, right, on a practical level. Is the issue the way this bill is written, or the initiative is written, or is the issue something larger than that?
Well, for starters, because of the way the initiative process works, of course, we have to vote on the words that are on the ballot. So we are concerned about the way the initiative is written and what it will do to our economy and to our citizens. It's bigger than that too, but what our concern right now is 522 and the words on the ballot and having to live with those words if it passes. And everything that goes along with that, the bureaucracy, the changed lawsuit standard, it changes the standard for getting standing in a lawsuit. There are just so many pieces and parts of the way it's written that we would have to live with if it passes.
Right, so Mary, and then Elizabeth, and then Clayton if we have time, and probably not Evan, but if we have time. Go ahead, Mary.
One of the things that's very concerning to me is the growth and power of corporations. And apparently, Monsanto, for example, once they start selling their seed to a farmer, the farmer has to buy it every year, and it's more expensive. And they've even sued farmers who have saved and used their own seed. And I don't think I like anything that gives more power to these corporations, and also seems to be decreasing the diversity of seed. We have just a narrowing down onto only a few products. That can't be good.
Okay, that's actually an easy one. As far as when a farmer chooses to buy a specific type of seed, they do sign a contract agreeing to the terms of how they're going to use that seed. Now, if I buy the seed this year and I don't like the way it happened, I don't like the contract, I don't want to deal with those people, then I don't have to do it next year. I'll go buy seed somewhere else. There's absolutely nothing that ever requires anybody to go back and buy it again, unless they like it and want to go back and buy it again. Now, it is true that the contract does not allow them to save and plant the seed.
Which is what farmers have always done.
But look at, it's the same, it's patent law, it's the same as music or a play. If you're putting on a performance of a play, you buy the rights to put on that play X number of times. You're not allowed to keep the script and keep doing it year after year unless you pay the royalties. Music, when you download music, you're not allowed, or a movie, you're not allowed to sell it and make money off of that. It's very limited. It's kind of the way our patent and contract system works, and it's to protect the person that put the time and energy into developing that unique product, whether it's music or a play or seed.
Narrowing the biodiversity.
Actually, we have a huge amount of biodiversity in that more and more people are saving and getting into heirloom seeds. There's a lot more diversity available now than there used to be because of saving the heirloom seeds and more people are growing those types of crops. Now, within commercial agriculture, it's true that people do grow, the crops that are most productive and most profitable for them to grow. But in terms of the garden seed market, there's lots of diversity there.
Elizabeth?
So, a lot of our crops there's an international market for a lot of our crops. Wheat, apples, other things. So, in a way, having to label it is not going to be more expensive because they have to put it to the international markets that they're non-GMO in the first place, so they have to label them GMO. We just saw that happen in Oregon, where GMO wheat was discovered, and Japan stopped trading with the whole Northwest until we could prove that the wheat we sell them is not GMO. So obviously they must have to be doing some sort of labeling already for a lot of these products, apples, that sort of thing.
They're not labeling, there is no labeling requirement.
When they sell to the EU or Japan, obviously Japan wants some sort of...
I think it's important. It's not actually through labeling. All of those products are tested internationally.
Right. Right,
And
that's part of the international scheme.
Yeah, but a shipload of wheat goes to Japan or China. They test those products. They don't label them.
And I think it's important in the situation that happened in Oregon. First of all, the investigation is still ongoing. We don't know what happened there yet. But if this initiative had been in place, it wouldn't have made any difference. It wouldn't have changed that or affected it in any way.
So we are about out of time. So if you guys want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement, go ahead.
Okay. I think I can maybe best do this telling one little story. Washington's the #1 raspberry growing state in the nation. And we have a lot of growers who are also small processors. A lot of our raspberry growers freeze the berries, and when they do that, they add sugar. And most sugar comes from herbicide-tolerant sugar beets. So if this passes, all of those great Washington-grown raspberries are going to have a label on the package that says GMO. And that's really sad. That's sad for our growers, and that it would frighten people away from eating something that is so wholesome and so tasty.
Great. But we're out of time. But thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.